Hello, everyone. You're listening to another episode of the Colleague Down the Hall podcast, and I'm excited to share that this is the 100th episode. I want to thank all of our listeners for your incredible support. This has just been a project that I've loved and enjoyed, and it's allowed me to meet lots of new people and hear lots of perspectives. So thank you for showing up and listening. And today I'm joined by Miranda Palmer. Miranda is an LMFT and a therapist advocate who has been helping pre-licensed and licensed therapists find joy and financial sustainability in their work. I've invited Miranda on today to discuss an important question she posted on Facebook. Welcome, Miranda.
Oh, thanks for having me here, and I feel really honored to happen to be here for the 100th episode.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and I realized oh my gosh, this is the 100th. I should probably say something.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So the question on Facebook was, what do you think is the biggest problem today for therapists?
It was really interesting, and obviously, I've been working with therapists for 15 plus years, so a lot of therapists in my Facebook group, and there's this overwhelming space of, therapists aren't being paid a sustainable way. This is the reimbursement rates are terrible. Insurance companies are really exploitive of therapists, calling on the telephone to manage these things. This doesn't feel good. It was this really common space of people saying, hey, insurance feels like it's kind of breaking our profession. But I think also for a lot of them, it's really disconnecting them from the idea of enjoying their work and believing that they can actually do this in a sustainable way. We have now more therapists leaving the profession than entering it. We're seeing this huge trend of more and more people deciding not to pursue licensure and deciding to be someplace in an in-between, maybe doing coaching work or doing some work that's not licensed work. And I think this is a huge piece of it.
I so agree with this. And this is something that gets discussed all the time in Facebook groups. It's not only the amount of training that we have to go through to get licensed, but then we get on panels and the rates are ridiculously low. And a lot of people will say, well, it's perfectly fine for me. But if you start digging into, so are you saving for retirement with that income? Are you paying for your own health insurance with that income? Have you had a vacation with that income? Because those are the things that we're sort of trained up to not expect when we're in grad school. You're going to be poor, but you're going to make a big difference.
Yeah, exactly. The amount of people who you dig in a little bit more and you find, oh, they have a spouse who's the primary breadwinner. Like if they stop working tomorrow, they'd be okay. And there's other individuals who are like, I'm actually really not okay on my own.
Yeah.
I think the other part too is we get in Facebook groups and we kind of in some ways we're very territorial, but in other ways we're all having the same experience. We all have the same privileges. And we assume that when somebody talks about Blue Cross's reimbursement rates in Ohio, in Arkansas, and in Los Angeles, California, and Florida, we're talking about the same thing, and we're really not. Realistically, each one of those insurance contracts is actually with a different corporation. So we have these Blue Cross Blue Shield is this overarching space. And then they have these sub LLCs that take care of each of these states. In some cases, it's actually broken up in the states. For example, in California, we have Kaiser in Northern California, Kaiser in Southern California. And they're actually two corporations, two different businesses that are run differently and had completely different ways of managing their mental health resources and contracts. So this space where we kind of have vague conversations because
Yeah.
legally we're not supposed to be talking about reimbursement rates and people go, "Oh no, I'm doing great." Well, I had a client who was in Conway, Arkansas, super low cost of living. You could get a starter home for $150,000 and their reimbursement rate's $132. And then you have somebody over in Los Angeles County where their reimbursement rate was $68. And if
Yeah.
you can just imagine Los Angeles, highest
Yeah.
cost of living in the country,
Right.
and you just look and you go, wait, what? How did you figure out these numbers? These numbers don't make any sense. And then
Yeah.
you realize these are business people making decisions based on what we as therapists say yes to.
Right.
And the more therapists in the area, and the more that therapists will agree to lower contract rates, the lower the contract rates are. They are not connected with cost of living. They are not connected with your ability to run a business. They assume that you as a business owner are only going to say yes to things that are doable and sustainable for you.
Yeah, I don't know why I never thought of this before, but I was thinking about insurance and how annoying it is because I have an insurance company that owes me thousands of dollars since the beginning of the year, and they have a problem on their end, but I'm the one who doesn't have money coming in. But anyways, before we like had these Facebook groups, we didn't have any idea what was happening in any other states unless you happen to have a colleague. And so when you have a company like Blue Cross Blue Shield, they want you to file with your local Blue Cross Blue Shield. And so we don't know what someone's being paid somewhere else. We don't all of a sudden want to be, someone's in California and they're making a lower rate. And all of a sudden we're getting this lower rate and we're upset. Or we're getting a higher rate and we're like, whoa, why can't I get that rate all the time?
There's been therapists, and this has happened throughout time. I noticed that when people would move and they would be like, oh, I moved from Ohio to Connecticut, or I moved from Connecticut to Arkansas, or what have you. Everything was working fine. They make the change, they start seeing clients, and then suddenly they go, oh my gosh, my contracted rates are cut in half. I assumed that my rates would go with me. And now, as people are doing more virtual work and they're maybe licensed in multiple states, or maybe they're part of the Psy Compact of psychologists where they can practice in multiple states, it's becoming really clear that there's a lot of differences and it's getting more complex to navigate. I think the
Yeah.
other thing that's really complex to navigate and to like sit with is the particular laws and regulations in your state that can provide additional protections or that
Yes.
don't. So, for example, in Texas, they have this wonderful like prompt pay act. I might be misnaming it, but you can Google
Yeah.
pretty easily.
Yeah.
And if somebody submits a clean claim, the insurance companies have to pay in like 5 days. It's
Wow.
wild. And if there is something that happens, those insurance companies can be fined if they are seeing that they are not paying within that time frame. In other states, you have no regulations whatsoever. So in Illinois, if you submit a claim, the insurance company pays you. And let's say they submit a clawback. They decide, oh, actually, whoops, we shouldn't have paid you. You didn't know this. And we didn't know this. Here's the dynamic. And we've retroactively canceled this person's insurance back to whatever. In Illinois, they can only do that up to like a year. In some states, there is no statute of limitations in terms of clawbacks. Now, again, we're not talking about just clawbacks, or there's some other words for it that are related to like you did insurance fraud. Like insurance fraud is insurance fraud. But we're talking about legitimate issues where you did everything in the right way. There was no way that you could have known that there was something else happening. There are documented cases. They don't happen all the time, but when they happen, they are catastrophic for therapists.
Yeah.
You
Yes,
know, they
absolutely.
are catastrophic because you don't think that 3 years later, somebody can come back and say, hey, that $15,000 we paid you over a 3-year period, we want it all back. And actually, not only do we want it all back, but since you're still in the contract and you're seeing other people, we're going to go ahead and take that out of your current payments. So, one of the things that we talk about when I'm trying to educate therapists as business owners and therapists who are like, I really want to make therapy accessible. Like, this is so important. People should be able to use their insurance. Like, it's beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, all true. And yet we have to plan for things like clawbacks. We have to look and say, well, is that rate going to allow me to do insurance, vacation, sick time? And can I put a portion, and depending on which insurance plans you're using, somewhere between 10 to 30% of all of that into an account for clawbacks, because
And
depending on the insurance company, they are more or less likely to do that.
right. And I think the insurance companies have to be well aware that the idea of an audit and potential clawback is terrifying for most of us. And so we're not going to do anything risky. We're going to try and do the things that most people do because we don't want to raise any red flags. And that's a whole other level of working with insurance companies.
It really is. And I think the part that's really interesting that I think we have have to really start to unpack our idea of what an insurance company is and who we are. I think that we often see ourselves at a base level as an employee, that there is a boss somewhere, even though we're like private practice and I can be more independent. We're kind of trained up to work with the idea of a boss or board and somebody who's going to make things right, some kind of code of ethics, like here's what's going to happen. But realistically, when you start to work with insurance companies, for the most part, you are a for-profit business who is contracting with another for-profit business. That for-profit business, the insurance company, is making decisions that make sense for their bottom line and for their shareholders. Many of these insurance companies are now publicly traded companies. In fact, in 2022 and 2023, over $40 billion in profit after they paid all the doctors, all the therapists, all the rest of it. We, as the business owner who's contracting with them, we are not their client. We are not their employee. We don't have any rights that are not listed on the contract that business put together. Business often put together a contract that was heavily weighted to the needs of their business. And I think if many of us read through what was actually in those contracts, we would start to scratch our head and say, well, this isn't right. But we assume if this insurance company is doing this, and they've been doing it for a long time, that it's okay. So I've seen contracts, for example, if somebody signed the contract today and the contract says, hey, I'm agreeing to do this for the next year. If they decided a couple of months in, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And they decided to cancel their contract at the end of that 1 year, that contract forced them to keep seeing clients at that contracted rate for another 18 months after that. 18 months, longer than the initial duration of the contract. It was wild. And it's often that you have a contract that you're signing and then that contract references this manual and that manual and this manual. So there might be thousands of pages of things that you're agreeing to without really realizing it.
Right.
And I think at this core place, the customer of the insurance company is your client. It's your patient, the person receiving services. They are the ones that actually have the protections. They're the ones that have patients advocates. They're the one that are paying money and their employer are paying money to that person or to that insurance company. And they have rights and services and resources that we will never have, or I don't imagine we will ever have. Because someone I see in the world today, I don't think we're going to see that we do not have. But we're coming in and saying, well, because the insurance company isn't doing right by their customers, we're going to come and stand in the gap and we're going to hope that somebody comes to save us. I know he's coming to save us.
Yeah. And so many people, well, all people who have insurance have no idea about anything regarding providers. They have no idea that I could sit in a session with one person and get paid $60 and the next person I could get paid like 120. And we also don't even think about it as a choice. When I went into my solo private practice, I just wanted to get on as many insurance panels as I could, not understanding that first of all, it's really hard to get back off of them, but that the rates were going to be so different. And so I made a business decision. I'm going to drop those lower rate insurances, not because I didn't want to see their clients, but because I was making a business decision. I do a training and I say, raise your hand if you run a small business. And no one raises their hand. I'm like, guess what?
Raise your hand if you're in private practice.
Yes. I know. Like, we're just not trained around any of that in grad school. So it doesn't even occur to us.
And it's hard because people come in and they start going, I don't understand why I'm working so hard and I'm working so many hours and I'm still really struggling financially. How did I go from working at this agency for, let's say, $35 an hour and going into private practice and seeing all these people and I'm suddenly going, I'm in a worse financial position than I was before. And even though I'm getting reimbursed sometimes $100 or $60 or what have you, like in my mind, even at $60, I'm getting reimbursed twice as much as I was getting paid over here. We do our funky math. 35 is more than half of 60, but we do funky math. We eyeball it. We just just kind of play with it. We don't stop and go, wait, what does this really look like? And that $35, when you add on to that, somebody's paying payroll taxes. They're paying 7.5% that's going to Social Security and to the other SDI program or what have you. You're paying right off the bat, you're paying another 15% off of that $60. Your vacation, that even if it was crappy vacation, all of that, your sick time, your supervision, that person who is answering the phones for you, your desk, your paper, the power, like all of those things were all kind of taken care of. And so we don't sit down and really do the math of what are my business expenses? What is different about my tax situation now? Oh my gosh, the mind blow piece of that. What does this look like? And really sit down and go, when I look at these numbers and I'm really honest, what is a sustainable rate? When we teach people how to figure out what the rate is, everybody says, well, just tell me, where do I research to find out my rate? How do I look to? How do I decide how expensive I should be? And we say, don't look at any of that. Don't look at anybody around you. You're going to sit down and do your math. And so we have them look at their expenses. We have them look at how many weeks off they need per year, whether that's partially maybe they're a parent or they're caring for someone, whatever the dynamic is, like how many weeks are you actually going to work? And then looking at their particular tax situation and doing all that math. And then our program spits them out and says, based on all of that and the number of clients that you can see per week, where the first client of the week and the last client of the week and the first client of the day and the last client of the day get equitable services, that they're all getting the same version of you. The same ready to go therapist, not the stuck up therapist, not the burnout therapist, none of those, the whole shebang. Like you are fully present for this experience. This is the lowest you can charge on average. Basically, the Excel gives them the number, and people are constantly like blown away, like, oh, that's why I've been struggling. That number actually is 120. And my private pay rate was 130. Actually, I came up with a great number. But half of the people that I'm seeing have been paying 65 because of this insurance plan. And so I need to see 30% more people, or I need to charge my private pay people another $60. I need to charge them $195 for those private pay people to supplement insurance companies that are reimbursing at too low of a number. And realistically, those same insurance companies are making billions of dollars in profit.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. And I will even say to friends, do you have any idea what it's like to show up to work and A, you're not sure if you're going to get paid, or B, you're not sure if you're going to get to keep the money? Who does that? That's exactly what we do, because until you submit that first EOB, you don't know if you're getting paid. And they can tell you the wrong information, and then they still are going to take the money back. They're the ones making the billions in profit. So the whole system, you referred to it as the beast. So we're feeding the beast.
Yeah. And I think this piece, we look and we go, oh, the system's really broken. But every time we sign a contract that says, I'm going to see this client, we are feeding it. We're saying, yep, you can do that. But if we all said no to insurance contracts that were not sustainable for us, that literally are not good for clients. You have to see twice as many clients. You're falling asleep in session. You can't even get your clients in on the regular amount of treatment that they're needing. All of the different things that we know happen out in this scenario. If we just said no to those things, I'm a client of that insurance company, and there's nobody who's a trauma therapist in my area who has space. That insurance company still has to connect me with a trauma therapist, and they have to find that person for me. Otherwise, it's something called phantom insurance. So now it's on this insurance company scenario that they have to go and find someone, and they have to reimburse them at their full rate, or they have to negotiate a higher rate, or they have to do something in those contracts and plans to suddenly bring therapists in who will say, oh, yeah, I really do want to work for you. You are not being crazy. We're passing laws in my state that say you need to pay me within 10 business days. Can you imagine? That you need to provide EOBs on your website, that if you give me an explanation of benefits from your website and I print it out or I save it, that you can't later say, no, I changed my mind. You have to honor the explanation of benefits that was provided at the time of service. You can't do clawbacks more than 3, 6, or 12 months past the point of payment After often these clients have graduated, moved on with life, whatever the dynamic is,
Mhm.
we're not doing those things. Suddenly, like therapists could say, oh, this is great. I would love to do this work. But as a for profit insurance company, there is no reason for them to increase your rate unless there's some discomfort. Right now, we have some people saying, hey, we know that this beast thing is a problem. We're going to come in and we're going to help fix it. We're going to make it easier for you to work with the beast. We're going to help you credential. We're going to take on the clawbacks with you. We're going to navigate this whole process with you and we're going to make it better, right?
Mm.
It's fantastic. Let's go. Except all of those places are venture funded capital, millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Mhm.
And all of those venture capital funded companies, they need to take a cut and a profit. So
Mhm.
let's think about this for a second. If I'm looking at the insurance reimbursement and I'm having this experience and I'm trying to navigate this just with me, and I'm finding that I can't live on this. If I now work with another company who now employs 10 times as many people and is like navigating this whole thing. And that now has stockholders and other venture capitalists who've given millions of
Mhm.
dollars and they want, I gave you 1 million, I want 2 million back. Where do we think that percentage is going to come from?
Yeah.
Where do we think all of that profitability is going to come from? And we're already finding it with some of the companies who kind of come in to do some of this middle ground work where they're looking and going, oh, the insurance companies are making these issues and making changes. We're actually getting paid no money for these particular insurance companies. How long do you think that's going to last before your percentage and your reimbursement rate goes down even farther?
Yeah. And they present these venture capitalist companies are coming in. They're doing us this big favor. They're making insurance accessible to all the people, and you can be a part of that. And we're going to take such good care of you. And through my membership, I will sometimes say someone's getting in one of these companies, and I'm like, let me just suggest that you need to panel yourself with a couple of insurance companies because who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. And you don't want to wake up one day and they've disappeared or they've checked out or they've been shut down and you can't make any income because it's going to take a while to get paneled yourself. So pick your highest payers, panel yourself, and have that backup.
I think it's also interesting too, because they're credentialing and paneling across a wide variety. There are scenarios too where people were trying to opt out of Medicare because the reimbursement rates didn't work for them. And even just the process of getting credentialed through Medicare wasn't a good fit. But with Medicare, and specifically, this is a lot of MFTs because we didn't have the option of doing Medicare before this. You have to make a decision that's global, that's based on every work environment, every work setting. If you have a private practice and you're also working for a psychiatric hospital, you're making a decision to opt out in both places,
Right.
which can be a problem. Well, people are then getting dropped and fired from some of these companies and from these other places and saying like, no, you have to make a decision. It's all or nothing, even when the numbers and the situation really don't fit for them. And then
Yeah.
again, people feel like beholding, they feel like stuck. I've literally worked with people who came to me and they're seeing 45 clients a week and they're still like financially struggling. They're so burnt out at the end of the
Yeah.
day and the end of the week to have any energy to do anything to pull themselves out of it. It gets this really like sticky stuck place. I really need to get out, but I really don't have the energy. It feels very much an abusive relationship. It feels like this sticky place where you're so focused on just your safety day to day, the planning to be able to move out of that relationship if it doesn't work for you, you just feel
Mhm.
very stuck. You feel
Right.
like there's no options.
Yeah, and when you zoom out and you look at the big picture, insurance premiums and deductibles have dramatically increased over the last number of years, just unbelievably. We companies, we were 3 years through the marketplace, and essentially we could never meet our deductible. So we were paying for our care anyway, but you do it in case something catastrophic happens, you know? And most people don't think about that. The money is coming in, it's pouring in. Those insurance companies have money pouring in. They don't know what to do with it all, but the profits tell the story.
So I'm still waiting for the final numbers to come out and for 2024. What it's looking like so far, the only reason that they're going to make less money in 2024 than they did in 23 in terms of like total profit is because of Russian hackers, because of getting hacked and having to do a payout. That's the only reason. When you look at their scenario of how they have this set up,
Yeah.
they're very good business people. They're
Mhm.
very good business people. In fact, not to get like just a teensy bit political here, people are looking and saying, hey, government, seems like there's a lot of money going in and like we're really struggling to see where that money is going. Well, when you look at that, they have been contracting with insurance companies to farm out some of the resources that we're paying for through our taxes, through Medicare or through welfare programs or just insurance programs for people with Social Security, whatever the dynamic is. But they are taking 20% profits on all that money that's coming through the government. So after expenses. So they are going through this whole scenario where we are, even from like a governmental standpoint, the government is sitting in the gap and taking care of profits for them. We're sitting in the gap and giving profits to them. The
Yeah.
actual clients are sitting in the gap going, what happened to like having coverage and insurance? I don't understand what's going on. Everybody's standing in the gap except the insurance companies. And we now have situations where if you say, well, I'm just going to opt out of insurance, this doesn't really work for me, then now from a tax perspective, you're going to get another fine or whatever the dynamic is. And you're like, something's
Yeah.
broken.
A new trend that I've been hearing from group owners that I know is that insurance companies are actually reaching out trying to buy their practices. They want to bring the therapist in house so that they can dictate what type of therapy, how long. They're talking about moving to measurement based therapies. You keep a client too long, you start getting paid less. None of that is in the best interest of the client, but it's on the uptick. I'm hearing about it almost daily now from big group practices.
And the group practices, the ones that I talk to, they feel like kind of stuck because on one side, it feels abhorrent to them. The last thing I want to do is do this dynamic. But on the other side, they're like, I want out. Like, this system is broken. I need out. One way or another, this is going away. Like, I can't keep doing it the way that I'm doing it. So I'm gonna say no. I even had someone who they were really careful not to choose an insurance company as they were selling their big group practice. And they were just like, I want to make sure my people taken care of. I don't want this dynamic. And then the person, after they had already made the sale and like the part was in process, that company got bought by the
Oh
insurance
my God.
company. So
Oh
this
no.
sold in that
Oh my
good way. So
gosh.
they're just like, I worked so hard to try to do this sale in a way
Yeah.
that would be taking care of my people. But like, oh my gosh, I just need out. And I think there's even when you look at decolonizing therapy, there's this great book by Jennifer Mullen. There's some people who are standing up and saying, like, we made some choices as a profession many years ago to try to be legitimized, to connect ourselves with this medical system. And does this medical system really fit the work that we do? Is this really in our best interest and in our client's best interest? If you look at the way that the model works, even for psychiatrists, for physical therapists, for like almost every other scenario where you're seeing people, there is this weird sort of, oh, you're doing this code to be with a physical therapist, but you get 5 minutes with a physical therapist, and then you get 20 minutes with the physical therapist A, and then you get 20 minutes walking by yourself on the or what have you. Like our scenario of we're sitting with someone face to face for 53 minutes, and there's no one to farm that out to. There's no
Right.
dynamic. Like we are here. There's no way to make this make sense for the most part. And so it's this place where we have to, I think, really have some really honest conversations. And at the base level, the honest conversation is if I really love this work and I want to make sure that every person who comes to see me for therapy either gets better or I refer them out to someone who can help them get better. That is what I'm standing behind because I believe in the power of people to change. What do I need to do to create that dynamic? And if I can't do that around insurance, why am I taking it? If I look at the fact that at my outcomes and I say, for example, I went and tracked and I said, oh, somebody who's coming in for 12 sessions, and they come in every single week for 12 sessions. And I compared their outcomes to somebody who came in for 12 sessions over a 6-month period. They came in once or twice a month or whatever the dynamic was. And I was to compare that. And I find that consistently, the person who came in 12 weekly sessions gets a better outcome for the same amount of investment.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I agreeing to see people in this extended space? I think there's probably like a little bit of a truth in terms of outcomes work that insurance wants to do, but they want to use it for bad. People in But there's a lot of therapists that say yes to clients and say yes to things that they know they can't actually get people the outcome that they need. So then people say, well, I went to therapy for 6 months and it didn't do anything for me. And you go, as a therapist, man, I work so hard and I try to be so flexible and I try to like do this dynamic. Yeah, we co-create this experience with our client, but we also say, hey, I can see 4 weeks in, I don't see a lot of change here. And I know you want to feel change. Couples wait 6 years on average after they know there's a problem to start therapy.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be 6 months until they start to feel a little better.
Mm-hmm.
Can't see those couples once a month and think that that's
Yeah.
gonna unravel the dynamic.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
And same thing with people that are anxious, traumatized, people with ADHD or neurodivergent folks, like all these different spaces. People come at the point where they're like, I need change and shift right now. Are we giving it to them? And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, if we are giving it to them, then most of them would be much happier to come and pay for that out of pocket because they know they're never going to hit their deductible.
Right. Yeah.
Get their outcome and be graduated and be done.
Yeah, I've been bringing on more private pay clients, and it's just such a joy to have the session, get paid right away. It's all done. You write your note, it's all done. No one's going to take the money back. It's a possibility if they submit a super bill, they might want to look at the records, but I think that's pretty rare. It's just you leave thinking like, "Huh, this was a good day," not like, okay, now tomorrow I've got to call this insurance company and that insurance company and they're who knows if they're gonna give me the right information. I had a client call about out-of-network benefits, and they said, "Well, kinda depends. It might be around 30%." I said, "No, you need to call them back. That's an exact percentage that they can give you. It's not willy-nilly. It's a number, and it's part." I said, "And you can look it up yourself because it's part of your policy that you're paying for."
But here's the part is that when you look it up, what they will say sometimes is that you can do out of network. It's a percentage based on the reasonably expected. So they will actually create a rate scenario. And this isn't all insurance companies, but this is some insurance companies where they will say, well, our top rate will do 30% of your out of network rate up to
Yes.
this amount for this particular part. But again, she's not going to say, well, that number is $167 or $192 or $220 because they don't want you to have access to that information. So that's
Mhm.
part of why they're giving them sometimes this runaround number is because
Right.
they have other made up numbers that they did that they said, well, this is what we decided is the max that anyone could ever charge. And so we'll pay 30% of that.
Yeah, but this time now the hassle gets turned back on the client because now they're getting reimbursed less. People with private pay, you pay me like right before, right after the session. And then you deal with the reimbursement from the insurance company. And some people are like, I'm not even going to bother with that because
It's because it's a pain. There are some companies that are coming in the middle of that. Reimbursify.
yeah,
Is it Mentaya? There's like a Mentalink
yes.
and then something else.
Yeah.
There's 3 different ones that are there
Yeah.
sort of at base and they kind of put some dynamics in place. But again,
Yeah.
it's all these things that are connected to the idea that the system's really broken. It's also
Right.
like, just as a side note, I know we're probably running out of time, but even this whole thing about the No Surprises Act. The No Surprises Act was put in place because insurance companies were giving answers like that. We'll give you 30% of blah, 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 blah. And the No Surprises Act was supposed to make clarity so people could make informed decisions about what their rates were.
Mhm.
When that got passed, somehow the insurance companies came in and said, this is way too complicated. We can't possibly do that. We need people who are private pay to go and put together these statements of benefits or what have you, even though there was never an issue of private pay therapists not being clear about what their fees were or how that worked. It was
Yeah.
always about insurance companies, and the insurance companies got it twisted around and created more work for therapists.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing when all that happened, it was like the beginning of December and it was going to go into effect in January. And all of a sudden, it's a hot topic in all the therapist Facebook groups, and everyone's freaking out. And we don't understand. It's very complicated. How are we going to do this? And by the end of December, I was talking to a couple friends who are in different types of medical care, and they had no idea what I was talking about. I'm like, you're a dentist, you're a PCP, you're a surgeon, and I'm worried about this little old me with my small caseload.
Correct, but because they were taking insurance. So basically, this insurance-based thing that you shouldn't have surprises when you go to the hospital
Right.
and, like, it's an out-of-network hospital, or, like, you go to an
Mhm.
in-network hospital, but there's an out-of-network physician that's coming in, or an
Yeah.
out-of-network anesthesiologist.
Right.
Like, these are all the dynamics that what this was put in place for. And then suddenly, if you took insurance, you didn't have to do this at all. You don't have to give them the form that says, "This is how much it's going to be." Because we can't.
Yeah.
Because the insurance companies won't tell us even as the provider. We can't get these numbers. So
Yeah.
suddenly it's just so messy. And I think this place for anybody who's listening who maybe you're feeling angry or feeling
Yep.
frustrated, maybe you're feeling like shut down, feeling like a little overwhelmed, like rude no matter what I do. If you can tap into that sense of frustration and anger, and also into that fierce protection you have for your clients about really wanting to support them. And if you can let that really burn up a little bit and motivate you to say, I understand the system is broken. That is not my fault. And I get to make some choices about how I move forward. And I'm going to start doing what I teach my clients to do, which is to identify their yes and identify their no. Say yes when it's a yes and say no when it's a no. I'm going to start unraveling from the things that don't work for me. I'm going to start advocating for legislation in my particular state. I'm going to even find out what the legislation is. Texas has got the Prompt Pay Act, and like California has it. Like, what?
Right.
What is happening? Like, what do we need to do? How do
Yeah.
Let's get on our ResistBot app and start mailing out to our senators. Let's use ChatGPT for good. I've been using ChatGPT to put together letters to my representatives. Can we make this a little bit easier and more fun and let this fire us up to take action and not kind of put us into a smaller cage where we get smaller and smaller and just go, well, I'll figure it out. But if your reimbursement rate that weren't working in 2019 before inflation and the cost of living crisis went up, if they weren't working in 2019 and now they're lower than they were then,
Right.
we have to start making some decisions. And I know that that's hard, and I know that it's scary. And I know there's also a ton of therapists that are out there saying you can't do private pay. It's not plausible because people cannot afford it. At the end of the day, the thing that we have to keep looking at is, can we keep affording to say yes to contracts that don't work? Again, say yes to the contracts that do. If you work well with that company and they reimburse well, fantastic. But if you're being reimbursed, this is still happening. This is my favorite example to give to people. There's EAP programs that will say you're going to get reimbursed for every EAP client that you get referred $99 for up to 3 sessions. And you're like, okay, 99 bucks a session. Like 3 sessions, not so bad. Nope, 99 bucks. Period. If you see them 2 times, you're averaging $45 a session. If you see them 3 times, you're averaging $33 a session.
Right.
This is the kind of like crazy stuff that's still happening out in the world that we have to go, wait,
Yeah.
this is not workable. And again, our colleagues, I've literally watched colleagues refer people and say, oh, but you'll get filled up really fast and you'll be able to convert some of those people over. And then you get on this insurance company does. I mean, it's still only $68, but like it'll be okay. You'll have to see about 50 people a week. Eventually, what? No, not eventually. Eventually, you will be burnt out, falling asleep in session, providing poor care, not finishing your progress notes. You said earlier, like, hey, people aren't going to take the risk of not doing what they need to do. I've talked to a lot of therapists who their progress notes are terrible because they're seeing too many clients and they're overworked.
Yeah.
I
For sure.
do think it's true we don't want to do that, but when we don't leave space for us to do appropriate documentation, feel like we can't afford to do that argumentation, or we can't afford to not see less than 50 clients a week. It's like, ooh.
Yes. Well, this is such an important topic. This is longer than our typical episode, but that's okay because this is such an important topic. I really wish therapists would start sharing this information with their family and friends because I'm getting paid less by Medicare this year than I have in the past. No one's job gives you a decrease and you still stay at that job. So these are all important topics that we need to be more mindful of. We need to work with our colleagues about. So this might be hurting for a little bit if we're not taking insurance, but it is possible to bring in private pay clients and run your business as a way to care for people, but also have a livable income. So my last question is, what is your favorite catchphrase or analogy that you like to use?
Don't compete, stand out.
I love that.
Not about competing with other therapists that you're better or worse than you, or competing with other therapists, whether you do or don't take insurance. Be really great at what you do. Be able to communicate that out in the world. Be impeccable with the kind of outcomes you give to clients. And when you stand out in that way, people will refer to you. Your clients will refer their friends to you.
Yes.
Will create something really beautiful.
Yeah.
And your heart and soul will feel good about it. You won't
Yes.
feel like a therapy mill of like, well, I'm doing my best and it's okay, but like I don't see change. It's no, I get to go in, I see change every week with my clients, even on the tough clients. And if there is somebody that like isn't progressing, I know exactly what to do and who to refer them out to. And I know that there's no fear about that because, oh, if I refer them out, I'm not going to have enough clients and I'm not going to be paid enough. It was like, no, I get to stand in my integrity about what I do, and it just feels so good.
Yes. That's wonderful. I love that. So thank you for being here, Miranda. I'm going to put, if people want to work with you, learn more about the coaching that you do, I'm going to put the Zenny website and Instagram links into the show notes so they can find you.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And for all of you hardworking therapists out there, please remember our work is hard, but it doesn't have to be lonely.